Hi. So one of the things that I hear often is, why are you doing cold exposure? So I thought I'd take this time tonight to talk about that and give you a little bit of history and update on why I started doing it, where, how, when, and all of those things. So I'm Dr. Cindy Hodgson. I'm the owner of Essential Therapies, which is primarily a John F. Barnes myofascial release specialty clinic, but we also do other things. And my goal in life is just wanting to learn as much as I can about the body to be able to help not only myself, but to help others. So the story on cold exposure goes back several years, actually. I first learned about cold exposure in, I think, around the year 2000. And I went to a Tony Robbins day long conference. And that's when I heard him talk about getting in 59-degree water every morning. And I thought, that was the first time I'd ever heard of that. It was crazy to me. I was someone who, my whole life, I was just always cold in the water. We always had a pool, and I was always the last kid in the water, even in the summer. It was, took me a really long time to get used to it and to get in there. And then I went through this little spurt for a while where I thought, oh, if I just jump in, it'll be better. And I did that for a while and it was pretty good. But still, my whole life, I really had trouble with being cold. What I really enjoyed was running outside in the winter because I love being outside. But because I was always cold, the only thing that really got me past that was when I started running. And I ran all through the winter for many years. And I remember the coldest I went outside running was 5 degrees. And I could tolerate it because you get warm while you're doing it. So there was that. But for the most part, I didn't like being cold. If I'd be in someone's house, or, I would always keep my house warm. A lot of people would keep their house at like 68 degrees. I couldn't stand that. I would just wanting to layer up all the time. And, that was just part of life. I also had this issue where you may be familiar with the term Raynaud's. What happens is your fingers can go like completely white and they get really numb. And that started somewhere in my 20s, I remember. And I didn't really know what to do about it. It just was something, that I had. Now, what happened with that, the Raynaud's actually went away after I started getting myofascial release several years later. So that was much better. I hadn't had that for over 20 years for the most part, but it was something that I struggled with there for a while. So I heard about Tony Robbins doing this cold water, and I thought, there's no way that I could do that. But I thought it was cool to be able to push yourself to that level to be able to get in the water. At that time, though, I didn't really understand any kind of physiological reason for doing that. It was just, and I can't even recall what he talked about back then as to why he did it. It motivated him. It was like pushing yourself outside your circle. It was like challenging yourself as soon as you get up in the morning. And then many other things seem easier after doing that. So that's what I remember from that experience. So fast forward, then I heard about it here and there a little bit about 3 years ago. And I even remember experimenting one time, getting in the water before it was really warm enough outside. It was like in May. I got into my pond at that time. So, but it was not anything I thought of doing as a practice. And then a couple of years ago, had just started looking around on Instagram, and I've of course searching for science stuff. And I came upon this researcher, Susanna Solberg out of Denmark, who had done a research study, and her PhD is in metabolism, which of course I thought was really cool. And after having a year of graduate level biochemistry myself, probably a little over 30 years ago now, where when I thought I was going to do a PhD in nutrition. Of course, I changed paths and went into physical therapy and biomechanics, exercise science for my PhD. But I thought that was pretty intriguing. So I started following her on Instagram and found that she had recently completed a study that showed if you do cold exposure for a total of 11 minutes per week in small increments, that you could have some physiological benefits. And of course, this was 2022. At the beginning of 2022, it was really at the end of 2021 where I first came across her. We were dealing with a lot of issues, of course, in our environment. And one of the things I was very into was wanting to improve my immune system. So I'm researching about this and following her and thinking, I wonder if I could actually do that. Well, at the time, I was going through some pretty heavy emotional stuff in the process of a divorce that was very painful for me. And I, so there was that in the background there. And I don't know, something just caught my eye about the idea of making myself do this as a plan to kind of distract myself. So there was a lot of emotional pieces to it. So I thought, of course, this could be good for me. I want to see these benefits. Maybe this is something I could start. So in March, it was the first day of spring, March 20th, 2022. I did my first cold exposure. So what I'm going to do right now is share my screen and show you. Here, the Susanna Sober website. So in case you're interested in doing that, this is not the Susanna. Here we go. Okay. So this is for Instagram actually. And let me go back. Here we go. So there are several, this is just recent. So I would have to scroll quite a bit to go back to what I was actually seeing her do. But you can see her here in the snow and ice. And I thought, whoa, how could you do that? And I just started reading a lot of her posts. It was very motivating for me to look at that. So that was the first thing. She has a lot of information on her Instagram, but also here is her website. And she has information. She even has a class out now where you can get certified to learn about the benefits of thermogenesis, and not just cold therapy, but also heat therapy. And she's very much into the stress management, because really what this ends up doing, and what it did for me, which I'll explain more in a minute, is it really helps us to modulate our stress response. And I'm going to go over here now also to another company I started following on Instagram was Morosco Forge. And so Morosco Forge is a company, let me see, let me go into the shop here. Here we go. So there's lots of information here under their science tab on cold plunging. And you'll see here their particular cold plunge makes ice. And as far as I know, it was the only one for a very long time that produces ice, and I believe maybe it still is. So it's on my wish list someday to have one of these cold plunges for my home, and maybe for the studio, so that people who are interested can give this a try. So one of the founders of this company is Dr. Tom, where did he go? Seeger, right here, cold plunge therapy for optimal health. There's a lot of this information on YouTube also. So cold plunge therapy for optimal health here. And he also has just finished a book called Uncommon Cold. So there's tons of information out here now. But 2 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of information. So this is where I was exploring. I'm going to go back over here to Susanna's page. And so I remember it was so new. Her book had just come out, and she actually wasn't hugely popular at that time. And I even messaged her a couple of times and got some feedback, which was really cool. So then what happened? I decided I was going to, quite literally, pun intended, take the plunge. So this was my first cold plunge. Again, 2022, first day of spring, and it is just a fast little clip that I did. You'll see it's very, very short there, but what the water was 47 degrees and the air temperature was 55 degrees. So now I'm plunging colder than that, but at the time this was like, I didn't know how I would be able to do it, but I decided to do it, and I survived 2 whole minutes. What I didn't know at that time, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. A couple of other things here. Here's another picture of the temperature of the water. So there's my little lobby lobster guy. It was like 46, 47 degrees. Hi, Chuck.
Hey,
So that was the beginning of when I started all of this. And here's another one. So that whole first week, I knew that the only way that I was going to be able to do this was to really psych myself up. So every day I was going to get in the water. I got my Instagram out. I pulled up people who were doing this and I watched them do it. And I thought, if they can do it, why can't I do it? And then here I am, day 4. So I did day 1. I survived. I didn't die. Decided to do it again. It was 2 minutes the first day, 3 minutes the second day. And then you can see here, day 4, I had 9 minutes total so far for the week, and 11 was my goal. And really, that all happened because of following Susanna and her kind of goal of 11 minutes per week, which was really helpful to me. So you can see here, 2 minutes, I got in the water, it was 46, air 37, and then, so on. So at the end of that first week, I was super excited because I actually was able to do it. And the thing was, it was kind of exciting. Like I had this sort of, it was like a contest with myself. It wasn't a contest with anyone else. It was just that I wanted to see what would happen. And I wasn't being super specific and writing things down. I just had a little notepad and I wrote the day, I wrote the temperature and of the air and the water and how much time I did. And I would just look at that by week. And I did that for a total of 3 weeks when I realized something is really going on here. And I couldn't even really put my finger on it, but I was feeling better, and it almost became like a contest with myself. I had to keep doing it, and it maybe in some ways it almost became addictive because I wanted to see what would happen, and then the challenge with yourself to be able to stay a little longer. But I realized you didn't really need to stay longer than 3 minutes, because you needed that 11 minutes total per week. That was going to be my goal. So a few weeks later, then I realized I was emotionally feeling better. And that's when I decided to do the search that, is there some sort of correlation with cold exposure and mental health or depression or that kind of thing? And sure enough, there's a ton of stuff out there about that. So I realized also by then, so I'm like 6 weeks into this now, that because I'd be watching my timer, I'd get in the water and start watching my timer. And I realized that about 28 seconds, because several days in a row, I noticed at 28 seconds, I felt better. Like I was able to take that sort of calming breath, that, I survived breath, and realized that at 30 seconds after researching this, that's the time. 30 seconds is when the dopamine, the norepinephrine, and all these other hormones that kind of help you get through this stressful moment start to rush into the bloodstream. And it was amazing. And once I started realizing that and how I felt afterwards, it was something that I wanted to keep doing. And it was very similar to me to that runner's high. So I used to do a lot of running back in my younger days. And I recall feeling, hey, these, especially the longer runs, you get this, like, it's a dopamine rush, and that's what I wanted to keep doing. So that's what got me started in this. And about 2 months after, 8 weeks, I think, after 8, 9, 10 weeks after I started this cold plunge, my dad passed away. And it was not expected. But boy, was I grateful that I was doing this cold plunge at that point in time, because it was definitely a very stressful time. And I knew that if I quit doing it, it would not be a good thing. So that really helped push me into continuing this, and then getting the DIY tub for home, and using just tap water and ice bags of ice, and different types of things to inspire me to continue this practice. So I will say hello here, Chuck. So you are someone who also is doing cold plunge. Do you have any questions or thoughts or comments as I'm kind of telling this story before I go into how I feel it's affected my myofascial journey? Nothing? I can't hear you, so you got to unmute yourself.
There we go.
Okay.
Oh, I guess my incentive was more along the lines of a dare. I don't
I
know.
did not hear you. Yeah.
And but I do echo your the parts that I think it does help your mental capacity to deal with stress and the physical aspects too. But I haven't been quite as consistent as you have. I don't have a pond in my backyard, darn it.
Yeah, I'm
It's
lucky.
not a real good excuse because they are available. But uh but it is something I do almost weekly. There's been a stretch or two where I've gotten out of it for a few weeks, but I don't know. I view it as a positive, you know.
You get something out of it is
Oh
that.
yeah, for sure. And yeah. I mean, I'm not into the science too much except hearing what you had to offer, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And
Yeah.
I've had some good times with it too. So it's amazing. I mean, once you get into it and you know what to expect, and like you said, that first 30 seconds is like, oh wow, I made a mistake, you know. But 30
Shock.
seconds is like, the calm sets in, and it's about the breathing,
Hmm.
to keep control till you get the hormones going, and hey.
So one of the questions that I often get is from people is how do you do it? Like how do you make it happen when going in there? And it's funny, I pulled up some of my old videos and the video from the first day that I did, because I actually got the tripod out because I wanted to see what it looked like from my perspective, and I could actually hear. It was quite a bit of ways away the camera was from the pond, but I could really hear myself breathing. And that this is kind of a funny thing now that, going back and looking at this, I knew breathing was important, so I was doing this long, deep breathing. But what I didn't realize is that I was really doing. I mean, there was a lot of gasping those first few days because it's quite shocking,
Yes.
quite shocking. So, but during that whole 2 minutes, I could really hear the breathing. It's really kind of funny to watch it now. And here's where it has helped me so much is that now, I mean, for quite a long time now, I don't need to do that. Like I can go into that water and I can calm myself by consciously feeling what my body's going through and using my mental capacity to say, hey, you're okay, you know? And it's, you might think that it's this sort of thing that you just get used to. But I mean, every day it's hard to get in there. Like, never is it easy to just like, okay, I still have to psych myself up. And I know that I'm going to feel good when I do it and after I do it. And one of the things my son actually came up with this. I often ask my kids to give me a little boost to get out there because they know I feel better, right? They want mama to feel better. Let's kick her out into the pond. And he said to me one time, it was how did it go? Let me get it exactly right. Mama, is there any time you got in that pond that you wish you hadn't? Wow, that's a great question, because
Yeah.
it really wasn't any time ever that I've made myself get into that pond that I wish I hadn't done it. And I always feel 100% better after it. But those early days were tougher because I didn't know how to regulate my stress and my breathing. And so what that has done since then, I have a cat I'm probably gonna have to get up and let out here. Um, what that's done since is allowed me to practice that calming effect through my breath. And it's not just with the breathing, but it's with your mindset. So you go into this whole aspect knowing what you're going to be doing, and you know you're going to be okay, and you have to talk yourself through it. But that piece has been super powerful for me. So let this cat out, and I will explain how that carries over, not just in the pond, but with other things as well. Okay. So, a year after I started the cold exposure, I had really gotten myself to a place of calming. I mean, a lot of things happened that year. I mentioned that my dad passed away, and then my mom was very sick a few times throughout the rest of that year. So into the summer there was a lot of stress going on. Into the fall there was even more stress going on, and I ended up actually stopping the cold exposure for October, November, and December. And it was around that, probably the end of November, that I started to really realize my mood dropping. Now, granted, I had been through a lot of stressful things that year. It was like epic stressful stuff. But, I didn't have this capacity to calm myself the way I had. I mean, the stuff was stressful several months before, as I was going through. So March, April, May, June, July, August, and so on. And all that time I was doing cold exposure. And then come October, I quit. And 6 weeks later, I start really noticing something. So to me, that was like, yeah, I really need to get back into that water. And by then, the pond had iced over, and it was going to be really tricky to get in there. So I was like, okay, I'm going to wait. I'm going to do it. And of course, the ice was like this thick. There was no way. It's like 5 inches of ice. It's just not going to work. So, all right, I'm going to do it after the first of the year for sure. No, maybe it'll be easier then. And sure enough, I was just like, okay, I don't care. I'm going out here. I'm chopping up this ice. And I went out there and was chopping the ice from the 2nd of January on, if I needed to. And I mean, the great thing about getting back into it is it didn't take as much time for those effects to start to hit me then. Like, I instantly felt better. I could feel that rush of dopamine and all the things after the 30 seconds. I was able to, I mean, it was harder to get used. I would say if you get away from it, it's harder to get going into it again, but it's still not as bad as the very first time once you started practice. And so 2, 3 weeks, those mental health effects really, really were showing up, which was awesome. So, but then as I'm seeing that change things in my life, one of the big things we talk about in myofascial release is self-treatment. And I'm teaching patients all the time about self-treatment, my legs up the wall, my hip stretches, the whole thing. And it's all about feeling inside your body, and really being calm. And as John Barnes teaches, channel 3 versus channel 5, channel 5 being, our intellectual side, being stuck in our head and our thinking and all of that, versus channel 3, which is this heart-centered space of being present in the moment and using our intuition. And it's more of this feeling side, and not so much the thinking side. So in the water, you really have to do that. Just getting in there requires you to go inside and talk yourself into doing it, for one. But I think more importantly is, especially when I look at those very first days that I was plunging, and there was stress, and there was a lot of it, and I was, whew, and I was yelling out sometimes, and it was tough. And I found myself, thinking of things like, well, what's worse than this? Like, one of the first things that helped me was, okay, there are a lot of worse things than being in this cold water. So what's one of them? And I the first thing that I thought of, the hardest thing I ever had done in my life, was to be with my grandmother when she died. It was really close to my grandma, and that was very emotionally painful for me. And I thought, this isn't anywhere near as bad as that, you know? And then I would think of the next thing. And I did have to do that in the early days to realize, okay, there's reasons why I'm doing this. This is how I'm sticking through it. And that's how I made it, you know? But when I progressed and I say, you know what if I could relax here? What if I could relax in this water instead of feeling, and tensing myself up? But, you get cold and how many times, this is how I used to be. My whole life was like this. I was cold so much and I would tense and I would feel this tension in my shoulders and my neck and my head. And then I realized I could start letting go in the water. What if I relaxed my shoulders? Well, guess what? When you relax your shoulders, it doesn't make it any colder. So relax. What if I could relax my breathing a little more? What if I could just breathe in and out through my nose? What if I could just relax the rest of my body and feel and go inside and feel what's in my heart, feel what's in my oh, what does that feel like? Oh, it feels kind of like burning. Wow. Heat feels like burning. And you start making all these associations in your brain and realizing how much we're able to feel. So the cold water is extreme, but it helps us to feel that cold. And I think I see this a lot on social media with people doing cold. There's so much cold plunging going on now. Like it's like exponentially bigger than when I first started looking at it 2.5 years ago. It's crazy. But there are a lot of people who are straining and resisting in that cold. And what I found is learning to soften and release and relax in that cold is very much like what I'm teaching people with myofascial release, to be present, to feel, to soften. What would happen if you just let go in the pain? Because a lot of people are dealing with emotional pain, other physical pain, whether it's back pain or all kinds of things. But if we stress intense during that pain, it makes it worse. Because one of the things that we know with stress and the physiological responses of stress is all of these chemicals and different things change in our body and make us more susceptible to disease, for one thing, or everything feeling worse. So if someone has a condition that's a painful condition, for example, if they become stressed, that painful condition just gets worse. It's just what we do. It's the NIH has said for decades that, 85, 9, now they're saying 90% of all illnesses are related to stress. So if we put ourselves in a stressful situation, it's about allowing ourselves to be present and manage that stress, even though we're still in the stress situation. So then a few months later, after I'd been doing this for a year, I got back in the water, after being out. I was in a bike accident, which of course you know very well, Chuck, about the bike accident. But I crashed my face on the ground and really crashed my cranial bones, shifted bones, so my teeth were in front of each other. It was a mess. And when it happened, I don't even remember the impact because I was just, I don't know what, you go out or something. But when I realized I was on the ground and couldn't breathe because the wind had been knocked out of me and my face was, was this burning pain, blood in my mouth, my teeth were, I didn't know where they were. And I'm like, okay. I realized I went into the same place that I do when I go in the water, which is connected in, feel what's happening. What can I do? And this is what I'm experiencing. It was like this a state of calm that I don't believe I could have been able to do had I not been doing this cold exposure. Because for over a year then, I had been practicing, what does it feel like when you're uncomfortable? What can I do? What can I do in this situation? What are my options, right? Well, in the water, it's to soften and relax and to breathe and to feel and to just stay with it, right? And so the same situation when I was on the ground, I'm like, okay, what can I do? My first thought was, I can't breathe. I tried to breathe again. I couldn't breathe. And I thought, well, I'm about to pass out. So then I'll breathe. It'll be okay. But it was an unbelievable state of calm that I wouldn't have had I not had this practice. And then of course it went on to the next thing where I was able to, I had to, my jaw wouldn't open. I was able to open my jaw calmly with self-treatment and then go into this self-treatment thing, which is a whole nother story. But that calmness is what allowed me to be present in that state. So that's kind of extreme self treatment. But when I go into my everyday self treatment now, which I was, very good when I have my legs up the wall or other different things that I'm doing of feeling my body and teaching other people to do that. But now this practice of getting in the cold water, calming myself, being present and feeling has enabled me to take this whole skill to my practice every day of what's going on in my body and what can I do and how can I go in and calm and release and relax and let that go. And many times even still I see patients like this, but many years ago I was so like this type A push 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 and not, achiever mode all the time, but didn't know what relaxing was, didn't know what breathing calming and letting my muscles relax and what that felt like. And I see it still today with patients who are on my table who are, I mean, even though they're lying there resting and seemingly relaxing, I can feel the tension in their body. I feel like, it's just our society, we just hold tension. And we've not been taught how to relax and let that go. So with the cold exposure, we get in there, I'm freezing, I want to go like this, and I still do it every time. I'm getting better. I catch myself now on the way in. I'm like, okay, chill, relax, and I can get in there. And now I can talk. I can carry on a conversation even when I first get in there, compared to the first early days when I just couldn't even collect myself. So I would say the most important thing for me has been this ability to notice what's going on in my body, feel that tension, and let it soften and relax. And even sometimes watching my heart rate and consciously feeling and getting my heart rate to come down lower. And it's all about bringing on a relaxation response in a stressful situation, which then has positive effects. So that's kind of it in a nutshell for me. There was a lot of blabbering about that, but Chuck, it's kind of so we don't have a lot of people on here tonight because I didn't do a good job of promoting it, and it was just like it kind of got away from me. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or questions specifically about how what I just explained about integrating that into self treatment. I know you're kind of you've been doing some self treatment stuff. You're still kind of building that for yourself, which I think it takes years really to
Yeah.
get good at self treatment. We can always improve. But do you have any thoughts or questions?
Wait, am I okay? Um,
Yeah. Yep.
no, you're right. I'm a work in progress. The cold exposure is it gives you another tool basically, and one that I never considered. Uh, Looking back and listening to you, and that I've done unstructured calming, I guess, in my own way over the years, and we probably all do to some degree. But the breathing has always been something I've used, even though I probably really wasn't doing it the optimal way. But but the cold exposure is a whole nother deal, and it is interesting to see how it's blossomed across what I see in social media and that anyway. For me, it seems to be very environment. The environment makes a big difference in my comfort zone. I've done it in the
Yeah.
bathtub, done the cold showers. I've done it in my garage. I've done the pond. I've done tubs outdoors, indoors. But for me, I just got to just drop in there, don't mess around, and I am generally close my eyes and just focus on the breathing, and that brings it together pretty efficiently and quickly. Um,
Yeah.
uh, but But yeah, it's a good skill set to have, I think. I mean, just like, well, I was a witness to your accident there, and that was remarkable on many levels. You seemed to be in control the whole time, and I didn't expect that. But so wherever that came from, your years of you know doing
Mhm.
what you do or the cold exposure, it's effective,
Well,
and
and
it's
I really
been a learning curve for sure.
yeah, and I really think it was more the cold exposure than anything. Like, had that happened even a year and a half sooner before I had done this cold exposure, I don't believe there would have been the same outcome. I definitely would not have held it together,
Yeah,
in the way that I did. I may have had those same skills of being able to work on my body, but if you're not in this place of being centered and grounded, you're not going to do as good of a job. And the same thing works, even if not something so extreme, but just like with maybe legs up the wall. So you've done some self treatment. Can I ask you a question? When you do legs up the wall, let's say, or you've been to some of my workshops where you're following the guidance of
right.
self treatment. um how is that for you to like go in like and feel what's going on in your body when you're doing one of those techniques? Let's just use legs up the wall because it's a simple one. Are you
I,
Do you feel like you're making that connection? I gotta let a cat in.
oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm
uh,
listening.
oh, okay. Um, I'm I've got a few decades under my belt, and I most of those years I've been an expert at tuning out discomfort and all kinds of things, and I do that very well. And going the other direction has been tough. Legs up the wall, it is a good tool. I have actually done a form of that for years. I would just simply like lay on the floor, my legs up on the couch. Yeah, not as structured, but that that basic thing. I've been doing that for decades. Yours brings some structure to it, and I do better with your instruction because I think I tend to focus where it needs to be rather than thinking of random stuff. But yeah,
Right.
I do it probably 4 or 5 times a week or days a week anyway, and do some of
It,
the
it's helped you to go. It's helped you to go inside more. That
yeah,
that feeling of the body and less kind of pushing through it like a runner would do, right?
right. I am always it always seems like I have some tension in my body at some point almost anytime during the day. And if I'm cycling, it's focused on that. But even just sitting sometimes, it's amazing how you get I don't know, I just like relax, chill. I do that a lot more now, even when
Okay.
driving. Yeah, so it is helping. It's something I'm very aware of, but it's I'm trying to reverse 60 some years of tensing up, and I appreciate all those classes and that you have. Those are remarkable. I think it's just an arena I haven't been in before, really.
Well, I think what's interesting is that just it's not, our society doesn't maybe value as much as a whole. I mean, there are pockets of it, of course. There's way more. Like when I first started teaching yoga 25 years ago, there wasn't a yoga studio on every third corner or anything. It was like very few and far between, and so there's more, I think, awareness on that. And I say yoga just because that kind of encompasses a lot of this idea of stress and breathing and the restful poses at the end and that sort of thing. And it's fairly new, you know. Um, but I think the cold exposure is another way to, you know, so I just had a thought that the cold exposure is a way to help manage the stress. However, it can be used in the wrong way, just like yoga often can be. When I first started teaching yoga, and I went to a yoga instructor training that was um, actually very therapeutic. And there are different types of yoga. One yoga could be very forceful, where you're like pushing and pushing yourself, which isn't really yoga in my book, right? Um, and so that is putting people in that same place. And I've been to classes years ago where I saw myself doing this. It's like just like the runner is pushing themselves, through pain to get through that whatever they're doing, right? In yoga, I've seen this happen, even where you're like pushing to do this technique or this routine or get in this position, and it's all coming from up here, you know? Or if you're pushing into the water and you're not using that as a practice to calm, then you're creating more stress, right? So we are creating stress on purpose. We're creating the stress on purpose in the water so that we can learn to manage it. We're teaching our body, even at a cellular level, to manage it, right? But there are still practices that are kind of touted to be a relaxing thing, and maybe they aren't. And so I'm just using yoga as an example for that, and also how cold exposure can be that way. Because if someone's not being taught to breathe properly, to really drop in, like you said, I actually use those words myself, like to drop into my heart center when I'm in there, and to feel and to allow and know that our body is designed to do this. We have mechanisms in place that are there on purpose, because we really aren't supposed to live in an environment that's constantly within 10 to 15 degrees, and we've kind of lost that ability. We know now that there are negative things that happen because we keep ourselves so comfortable. So yeah, I love that you said, you're good at, and so many people are, because we have to push ourselves. I mean, even as a child, sitting in school all day, I can remember, feeling that discomfort. Like, we're literally taught how to ignore that discomfort that we have, because we're not supposed to do XYZ, and I think, sometimes we do have to push ourselves through that discomfort, but knowing that we can make that choice and have a different outcome, I think, is super important. So
Yeah.
anyway, I've had a few patients and other friends or acquaintances begin this practice as well, and always I'm seeing, like, if people stick with it, I mean, there are definitely benefits that they see, and especially this whole mental health piece, I think, is something that we experienced immediately. So, as soon as I get in that water, I make myself go in there. And when I get out, my mood is better. And that's when, my son said, have you ever, you know, regretted getting in there? Never, because you just
Yeah.
feel so much better. It's just what our body does. So that's really kind of a cool thing that, if people are considering this, one of the things that I like to say is you don't have to do the 2 minutes, you do whatever you can. You just doing that practice and knowing that you need to breathe and all that kind of stuff. But if you can make it to that 30 seconds, you're getting that dump, which is so obvious. And you've experienced that. You mentioned you really feel that as well after that first 30 seconds. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The curious thing I've had is that now last summer, outside in a natural environment, I was able to, I mean, 10 minutes, 12 minutes sometimes, into the low 40s and that. Now, this winter in the garage, I typically it's like 3 minutes, and I've had enough, but so it'll be interesting
But
to
that's
see when I
okay.
start working outside again. I don't know what that's about, but
Well, it's
Just
probably, I'll tell you what, it's here, right? It's here.
it is.
It's
Yeah, it
it's such
is.
a
It's
mind.
got to be a head
Yeah,
thing, but
yeah. The whole thing
but
is about, it's such a mindset. Everything is such a mindset with
and I
this, you know?
suppose one way to you know approach the cold exposure is view it like any other kind of workout or something. It's going to be uncomfortable initially, and you're going to
Right.
survive, and you're going to be better at the other end. The problem with a workout is it generally brings continuous tension while you're doing it. While, like you were saying, it's more beneficial with the cold exposure to try to relax, because that's it's the head trip, and then control. Kind of coming from a different way, but a lot of times I will view it as a workout just to get in
Yeah.
there. So I don't know.
Right,
We
right.
all have our mind games to to handle it, but yeah, absolutely. When you're done, whether it's 2, 3, 10 minutes, it's it's definitely a euphoric situation.
Yeah. No, I agree. So it's definitely something I'm glad I started and will continue to do. You know, I'm grateful I have my pond. I'm kind of sad that it's going to get warm here. So this lingering cold weather that we've had, there's one good thing about it is it makes the cold plunge easier for me since I can just walk out there. Um, but ultimately, I think it has really helped me become more centered in my own body to be able to recognize those signs and to feel everything that's happening, and also to know that I can change it and I can soften into it, and I'm going to be okay, you know?
Yeah,
And multiple times, especially in the, I mean, I haven't had to do this so much anymore, I guess, because I'm much, I'm getting in the cold water for even long periods of time isn't that big, is as big of a deal as it was before. But I can remember, something might come up for the day, especially that first year when things were so tough. And I'd say to myself, I'd think, well, I can handle that today because I did 5 minutes and 40 degrees this morning. That was hard. If I can do that, I can do this.
yeah, good point.
So speaking of mind games, um, but it helps and it makes you realize that you're stronger and you can do these. I can do hard things. That's one of my mantras that I say when I'm in the water sometimes in my head is I can do hard things, you
Yeah,
know? I can do this. I'm okay. I can do this. I'm okay. I can do hard things. I'm designed for this. That's another thing that I'll say, and I'll even think those words as I breathe in and as I breathe out. I can do hard things. My body's made for this. Breathing out, breathing in, these words that, and because words are energy and they're powerful. And when we start that from here, it changes the whole body. And I've played around with this in the water even. I don't I didn't need to do it very, very long because I realized right away that no matter what, if I start with the right mindset here and the right words, which
yeah,
are energy, and then my body follows my mind, it's huge. So you would think that I shouldn't hesitate at all just to get in there. Maybe in another, who knows how long, less than a year, I hope. I won't ever hesitate and I'll just go right in because I know that. But right now I admit I'm still hesitating.
you've 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 gone in some pretty difficult situations. I mean, whipping wind and chunks of
Oh yeah.
ice. Oh my goodness. I'm not sure I
Sometimes
quite
that almost
said.
makes it better. It almost makes it better because you have to psych yourself up, it's like you really got to get psyched to go do that, and then you've already got the adrenaline flowing, I think. So I don't know.
Well,
Anyway, well, I hope that. What's that?
you do use the eye of the tiger tool
Yeah,
occasionally
I do.
too. So
Almost every day, just because I like it. I love that song, so it does. It's like okay, it's time to do the thing, and then I feel much better afterwards. So it's all good. Well, thanks for the discussion, Chuck. I hope this helps maybe one person as they're thinking about their journey. And really, for me, it has incredibly enhanced my self treatment. Really shifted it to another level, and I think it has helped me help other people get to that place too. And I'm still on the journey. I'm still learning. There's so much more to learn always. Um, so I'm excited for whatever that is next. Any last thoughts?
No, I apologize for tuning in late. I honestly
Oh, no problem.
could not
Hey,
find
you
them.
and I'm gonna get the messages tomorrow. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, it's okay. I had too much going on to even send out the reminders, so no big deal. But all right, thank you. I'm gonna close it off. We'll see you next time. First
All right.
Thursday of the
Bye bye.